Many Medicines is recorded on Treaty 8 territory, the unceded lands of the Métis and the homelands of the Cree and Dene peoples. It is an honor to live and work upon these lands, and through this podcast we commit to uplifting Indigenous voices, sharing stories with respect, and walking in a good way with both the community and the land. Tansei, hello and welcome to Many Medicines, the intersection of art, culture, and healing. My name is Stacey Grant, and I am a Métis artist and educator here in Nistawayu, also known as Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo in northeastern Alberta. I created this podcast as a way to make a space where stories are served and honored rather than extracted. I thought it was important for youth to be able to have a place that they could look to, where maybe there was a path that they're walking where they needed to see that reflected, or even just to see somebody looking like them. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the show. Tansei, thank you so much for being here. If you wanted to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
My name is Mitchel Bowers. I am also known by my performer name, Simma Downe. I am a Two-Spirit Métis person, a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. I grew up in Bancroft, Ontario, which is unceded Algonquin territory, but my lineage goes back to Moose Factory in Northern Ontario.
So what brought you here, and how long have you been in Nistawayu, Fort McMurray, as it's more commonly known now, but how long have you been here, and what brought you up here?
I moved here in 2012 because my family had come here before. So when I moved here, my mom, my stepdad, my sister, and a bunch of cousins were all here. The cousins came first, and there was just a lot more job opportunities. And so then my mom ended up following while I was still in high school. And then when it was time for college, I decided to take a whim and not have to pay rent, live with my mom.
Yeah.
And go to Kyoto. And so that's what brought me here. And now they've all have left and gone back to Ontario, and I've stuck around.
Yeah, and you've made a huge impact while you've been here. So do you want to talk about the progression of what that has looked like for you? Because I met you through Arts Council with Buffalo, with the Buffies, and then our paths have just repeatedly crossed, thankfully, multiple times. So what are all the hats you wear? Because you wear a great many. So.
They're always changing. Yeah, so the hats I wear now, I sit on the board of directors for Arts Council as a secretary. I was a long-term board chair for Wood Buffalo Pride, but I'm now the executive director there. I also am the chair of the Regional Advisory Committee on Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity for the municipality, and I'm now just appointed as the vice chair for the Community Investment Program Assessment Committee.
Wow, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's really exciting, and it's so broad, the things you do too. It's not just one vein.
Yes.
So when you went to school here, what were you studying where it kind of led you into walking these paths?
It's so crazy. So I came here to take actually the arts program.
Yes.
And I moved here, I was accepted into it, and then canceled it that summer.
Classic.
Right? So I took a year off, and then my mom was like, you need to go to school, or you need to start paying rent or do something, obviously.
Yeah.
And so I was like, what can I go to Kyoto for that I don't have to do upgrading? Because I was like, I just want to get into it.
Yeah.
And my options were nursing or business. And so I chose business. Mm-hmm. And so I have my business management diploma from Kyoto. And after that, I went actually and worked in the oil sands did that for a year. And then I wanted to go to university. So I left and went to Halifax for a year and a half. And Halifax was really my eye-opening queer experience of I feel like before then I was very much, I was out of the closet, but I was like, there's this conversation of gay versus queer. And so I was like, I was gay, but then I went to Halifax and I became queer. Mm-hmm. So queerness is about not just your sexuality, but it's also a political, it's a whole part of your being. And so, I went to Halifax, became queer. That's where I started drag.
Okay.
And so I ended up, and actually, so that was during the fires. So I actually was supposed to fly back the weekend of the fire and missed it. Mm-hmm. So I ended up staying away for a whole nother year. So I came back basically for the 1 year anniversary of the fires. And that's when I officially moved back to Fort Mac. And now being a drag queen and being queer, I felt much more empowered to be an advocate. It was also, this is all around the same time that like embracing my queerness allowed me to embrace my indigeneity, because those were both things that I had been raised to like suppress.
Yes.
And so I was like, oh, I'm allowed to be queer and I'm allowed to embrace my Métis-ness, and I don't have to be ashamed of them. They can both come out. And so that's really when I started to like find my power and find myself as being a leader and a person in community. And like really when I came back, I was like, I want to be involved with, and it was just coincidental that like I moved back and I was like, I want to do a pride. And then it was like, there's already a group of people who were like, we're working on it. And I was like, okay, I want to be involved.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like there was so much, I don't necessarily want to say like divine intervention, but if we want to talk on an ancestral level, the way that your path kind of like looped and weaved, we always have a plan in mind, I think.
Yeah.
For ourselves, where, you know, if you had done arts at Keano, if that had still continued on as a program, do you think you would have ended up going to Halifax?
Probably not. No.
Right?
Yeah.
So then it's, you know, every piece of your story, even though it sucks in the moment, it's kind of like, well, what am I going to do now? It really layered who you are, where you already had such a layered story to begin with. You know, and I can relate a lot to the idea of going to university and really finding yourself in a way where up here it was something where for me and my identity and stuff like that, I could talk about it, but it had to be kind of a joke. Mm-hmm. I'm sure everybody knew, right? Because for me, I'm pan, but it's something where I didn't feel safe, right? And even being Métis, where I'm someone where I'm very white presenting or white passing, a lot of the time it was being in between two worlds, where for a lot of the time for my Indigenous friends, they called me they said, oh, you're our munyao. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's just kind of like, oh, thanks guys, like that's cool. But then for my non-Indigenous friends, there was always this level of otheredness and like pointing out different features and stuff, where even if I do have like or that tokenization
of like,
that was a big thing.
Can you do the land acknowledgement?
Yeah, for sure. Well, when I was in school, land acknowledgements weren't a thing yet, but it was something where people would use it to show that they weren't ignorant. Mm-hmm. So for you, you are Two-Spirit. And how do you find, now that you are able to live in your full truth and live authentically and be such a strong advocate, how has embracing that identity impacted your life?
I think embracing the identity, like to me, so I looked at like, what is the history of Two-Spirit? What roles did Two-Spirit people hold? And they held such prominent roles within community, within ceremony. And for me, it was like, if I'm going to claim that identity and claim that label for myself, then I need to live up to it. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like a lot of my community work has been to make sure that I'm honoring that label that I give myself. And I don't want to put that on other people. You can identify with Two-Spirit without being a community leader, but I felt for myself as someone who is white passing and has a lot of privilege, that if I'm going to claim it and really own my heritage and own that side of myself, that I needed to be a positive role model and to really make sure that I'm using the privilege I have to get other voices lifted and brought up with mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something where for you, I find that you move through the world with so much intention, whether it's to hold that responsibility or hold that respect, or reciprocity seems to be a huge thing for you. So how do you find that impacts you, especially when you're working with all the different nations here? Like you said, we're Métis, but you get to work with the Cree Nation, the Dene nations. So how does that end up being a piece where you do have so much knowledge from other places coming in?
Yeah, it's really a blessing, and I really give so much thanks and gratitude to a lot of the aunties that are here. Mm-hmm. There's so many amazing aunties who have seen me in this role as a Two-Spirit person and been like, that's a voice we're missing at this table. And so it doesn't matter what nation you are, that you're bringing a voice we need heard. And so they've brought me into some amazing circles. They've put me in ceremony. They've really helped lift me up and bring me into community and made me feel welcomed and safe. And then being able to use that position to connect with the Two-Spirit youth within our region has been so impactful. And so I'm so grateful for without the aunties, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you find that for you now that you are, like you said, in this leadership position where you went from being on the board and kind of a lot of people aren't a fan of the term grassroots, but, the creation of the Pride organization here, and now you are at that facilitation executive level. How do you find you've been able to maybe reach the youth more and other community members as well? But we can focus on the youth if you want.
There's some people who will criticize a grassroots movement moving into a nonprofit and moving into those colonial structures, but at the same time, you need to be able to provide for yourself.
Yes.
And we all have a certain level of capacity, and so being able to navigate these colonial structures, and have it be my job to do this has empowered me to be able to spend more of my time and be able to focus on it and not be distracted by a 9-to-5 elsewhere. It's this is my job. This is what I literally get paid to focus my time on, but it's what I wanted to spend my time on before that even. So it's one of those the cliche of if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Yes.
So I get to live that, which is exciting. And I feel like being able to navigate in this world, in this colonial structure of nonprofit, has given us a lot more resources to be able to have more impact. And it's to some legitimizing that, we are this organization, this is who we are. We're not just, some people are weary of the grassroots person because a lot of times there are so many people who appear to be grassroots leaders who might not be healed, who might not have all the right, they lack accountability when they are on their own.
Yes.
Whereas I feel like I have a great amount of accountability to my organization, to my board, to the greater public. Yeah. Because of the roles that I'm in.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a piece where you hold the responsibility of leadership in such a serious way, because you do want that input. You do want that feedback. There's conversations that people have sometimes. It's about giving the community what they need and not necessarily what they want.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And do you find that with you being in this place of leadership and having such a strong support system around you, has that helped you to maybe challenge or reform some colonial structures that do exist within, I guess, nonprofit leadership?
I think so. I think I've definitely been in a lot of rooms where we've looked at flattening our structure, and so other nonprofits our size are looking at adding in middle management, or we used to have a chair, vice chair. We've now flattened that to co-chairs, and it's little bits like that. But we also we start every meeting not with a land acknowledgement, but also talking about a community agreement of hey, just a reminder of these are our values and this is how we're coming together, and making sure we center ourselves that way before we start everything.
With your advocacy, I really do think that you put that out into not just the community, but the greater world, because you travel a lot and you do a lot of advocacy beyond this region. I don't know if that's something that you want to talk about at all, but
I don't know. I'm very blessed when I do get to travel. A lot of that is related to my drag, but I'm also trying to take those opportunities to educate as well when I have those moments. And a big part of that is in thanks to one of my dear friends, Ella Limera.
Oh, yeah.
Ella she has really grown into, it's so funny, when we first met, she was like, I'm not an advocate, I'm not this, and it has grown on her so much that now she is now her job to be an advocate. That's part of her, but I think she has definitely been, although as much as she is my sister, my partner, as a friend, she's also been someone that I look up to as this is an amazing two-spirit person who uses their voice in all the right ways to really uplift community and to educate as well.
Yeah. When you were younger, did you ever see yourself becoming a role model?
No, I honestly, when I was young, I had no representations of queerness growing up. And so, I thought I would not be here. I was I'll be lucky if I make it to my 20s.
Yeah. How do you, I guess, collate that in your mind of what you thought your adulthood would look like and what you're doing now, where when you look at, young you, 14 years old, 16 years old, and this is what you do now?
I feel like my queerness opened my mind to so much empathy.
Yeah.
And that is how I've viewed the world since. But if it wasn't for that, I would be on a totally different path. Like, I look at my siblings, my cousins, and they're like, we are nothing alike. But at the same time, it's given me a perspective that a lot of people who do align with me politically or have many of the same values, we often tend to look at people on the right in conservatism with such a negative lens, and like saying that these are hateful people and that. And I'm like, I don't have that, because there's my family who they vote conservative 100% of the time. But at the same time, I know that they're loving, and I know that they're not bad people.
Yeah.
And I know that if I were to talk to them about the values that I'm voting on, they've never even heard of them. And it's one of those things that's like, it's ignorance is bliss, right? And and just being ignorant of something doesn't make you a bad person.
Yes.
If we expect perfection, we're going to have no allies.
Yeah.
Because even within our community, there's so much that's not there. Perfection is not attainable.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Even just within the queer community itself, so many of us hold different viewpoints, have different experiences, maybe hold different levels of whether it's guilt, shame, fear, whatever, around whether it's being visible or interacting, where it's just kind of, sometimes people see something different than them and it's scary.
Yeah.
And it's not okay to be hateful because of that, but...
No, and I always, like, even when we're doing trainings and stuff, I tell people, like, you don't need to be an expert on gender identity or gender ideology or sexuality. Like, you don't have to be an expert. As long as what we want you to get out of this is to approach people with respect and understanding that they know themselves better than anyone else does. And so when they tell you that this is how they identify, this is how they want this is what their pronouns are, this is what their name is, as long as you know to respect that, you're good.
Yeah.
And so it's about not expecting perfection, not expecting people to be experts, but knowing that there's a code of conduct, and as long as everyone are going to approach everybody with respect and with some cultural humility, that you are a safe person, and that is someone we can work with.
Yeah. So with that, that's a training that Wood Buffalo Pride provides, correct? Is that you can go in and you become a rainbow space? Is that the... Yeah,
so the Rainbow Space program goes beyond just the training. So training is just one aspect of it. It's also, we will, like, if you're a business, we'll review your policies. We ensure that, so making sure you have anti-discrimination policy, a washroom use policy, and also making sure all your forms use gender inclusive language. And so if you do all of those steps plus the training, then you become Rainbow Space certified. You can just do the training on your own, and we're actually also coming out with a level 2 training that's more intensive, has a test at the end, big scary test. But and then you're as an individual certified Rainbow Space person.
Amazing.
Yeah.
See, I didn't realize that it was working from the foundation up to the actual governance within a business, a company, whatever.
Yeah.
Very cool. So do you find that something, I feel like I see photos every month of more businesses that are participating.
I feel like 10 or 15 in progress right now, and
Beautiful.
Then even more inquiries. My goal is that I want every nonprofit to be certified as a starting point. I feel like as a sector, we all want to be inclusive, and so I feel like that's an easy win for us, is to start with ourselves as a sector, and then expand into the broader business. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and it's a beautiful thing with this community, where I always say that it's big enough where you can go to the store and you might not see somebody you know, but as soon as you talk to someone, they know somebody that you know.
Yes.
So when it's something where a company, a business owner, a nonprofit leader says we did this and we got a lot of benefit and value out of it, it's planting the seed. For you, what would you recommend if somebody wants to be, whether, if it's a good Indigenous ally, a good Two-Spirit ally, a good queer ally? How does somebody begin to do that?
I think it's about, the biggest thing is speaking up when we're not in the room. And we have all been in spaces where we have heard homophobia or anti-Indigenous bias. When you hear those things, Speak up. Do not be passive of them. We want them to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We need them to question why they have these biases, and we need them to know that they're not okay and that they can't keep holding on to them. And so, like, whenever you're in a space and you hear racism, transphobia, homophobia, anti-Indigenous bias, you have to speak up against it.
Mm-hmm. For you, how do you view Pride? Is it an event? Is it something that is a broader celebration? Is it a way of being? What is Pride?
So I recently did one of our rainbow space trainings in Fort Chip, and we talked about how does it feel when you're, as an Indigenous person, in a white community or in a white space. And we talked about, like, being followed and being accused and always this assumption that you're lazy or that you're this. And then we're like, okay, how does it feel when you're at a powwow, when you're in ceremony, when you're at a culture festival? And they were like, it feels like everyone gets you. You don't have to question yourself. You feel right where you belong. Yeah. And that is what Pride is for queer people.
Yes.
It is that feeling of connection, of, like, not having to stifle yourself, getting to be able to be your full self in a place that's safe, that's joyful, that you know instinctively that if something were to go wrong, the person next to me has my back.
Yeah.
And the person next to them has their back. And, like, we're all here because we have this same value of believing and knowing that people know who they are and celebrating people for their differences.
Yeah. Kinship in the truest sense of the word.
Exactly.
It's family. No matter where you're from, there's that thread that connects everybody there.
Yeah.
And it's, oh, my love. Yeah.
Happy tears.
Yeah. Well, what you all have been able to build, and that's with community too. When I say you all, I'm not just talking like what Buffalo Pride staff and board, like the community as a whole, the amount of youth who are so proud because you guys have given them the platform and the basis to know that it's okay to be who they are.
I'm so in awe of the kids who have found themselves so young and have found strength and power in their identity and are able to stand up for themselves and own their identity at such a young age. I'm so jealous, and I'm so grateful that I get to help be a part of creating a space that feels safe for them to do that.
Yeah, well, and to witness.
Yes.
Where it's like you said, it's jealousy, but it's like a beautiful jealousy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I get what you're saying when you say it.
I love when we've been in communities, especially when it's like when we're fairly new there, and elders will come up to us and be like, "Thank you so much for being here," like, because we know in our communities a lot of our elders are still very tied to Christianity, and many of them still live within that colonialism that residential schools brought to them. Mm-hmm. And I'm not here advocating to get rid of religion in Indigenous communities. I'm not saying that at all, but I love seeing when they're able to just tear down that one little wall and be like, I remember when I was young and my cookum taught me about Two-Spirit, or I have this brother or uncle who was Two-Spirit, and like knowing that, hearing the stories of those family members who have walked here before us, and hearing from elders that they're grateful that we are bringing it back and that we're reclaiming our space and community is so heartwarming. And it's one of the things that whenever the rare time it does happen, which actually it's not even that rare, it's almost every time we're in one of our rural communities, an elder comes up and talks to us like this, it feels so unbelievable and so grateful to get to like be part of that.
How does it feel for you where with the work that you are doing, you're able to bring visibility and help to amplify their voice in a way where it's not extractive? You're not just taking information from them, but you're giving them a space to say, I'm here, I exist, we exist. this is what I was raised with.
Yeah, it feels empowering to create those spaces, and it's always, I love when I get the light bulb moment of like the light switch of like working with somebody or talking with somebody who has a two-spirit person in their life but hasn't always known how to support them fully, and they suddenly have that click of like, oh, I need to do this more for them, or they need this from me, or I could do this and it will make this huge impact for them. And I love seeing those little light bulb moments. There's been so many of them that like, and just knowing that they're going to leave this conversation with me and go back to this person in their community or in their family and make this change that's, I know is going to have a huge impact on that two-spirit person's life.
Yeah.
Like those are the moments I love.
Yeah. For you, on a personal level, because we've talked a lot about the community at large and all the work you do, which is beautiful and amazing, you have done a lot of healing work on yourself. You've been on very many journeys. So for you, when we look at you and your beautiful artwork, where you are an artist in many multitudes and many practices, how has art played into your healing journey?
Oh, so many ways. Like when I think of myself as an artist, in my like youngest form, I always loved to draw, and I would write. As a kid, I wrote so much poetry, which is not something I do a lot of now, actually, at all. But when I think of myself as an artist, that's where I really started, and it was a way for me to release so many emotions. And then I evolved from writing to doing more drawing and painting, and then one of my like drag becoming my art form was such an empowering thing for me, because it allowed me to embrace femininity that I was not allowed to do as a youth. As someone growing up, I grew up with all sisters, and it was anytime they wanted like dress up was my favorite game, and like I wanted them to paint my nails, and I was never allowed all these things. And then so being able to embrace my femininity and that other spirit within me was, and doing that in an art form, and then being able to see how I can connect with people through that art form. Like it was such a like mind-blowing but like heart-filling thing, and it didn't happen all at once. It was a growing thing as my drag expanded, as I did story time, and like it's helped me so much, because like Simma, I was not a public speaker before I did drag, and like she's given me the confidence to come out of my shell and to be an advocate. And so like my drag mother always said that like, and I was always taught like drag queens were at the forefront of every queer rights movement.
Yes.
We are queer, like queens are historians as well. We are mothers, we're caretakers, and so like I've always embodied that role as well. And so that's also like, it's a community role, but it's also artistic.
Yes.
And like being able to use my drag, I have a number I do that's very raw and personal, and it's about literally taking the text messages of my father disowning me and putting those into art and healing.
Yeah.
And so being able to use my drag, a lot of my drag is fun and camp, and that's me bringing joy, but at the same time I'm able to take those moments and like really pour emotion into it. So like that's I would say my main artistic medium. But then I've expanded from that, and I've gone back to doing some more painting, and then I wanted to really connect with more of my indigeneity and my Métis culture, and so I wanted to bead. And so once I started beading, it just like stuck like crazy, and I became like instantly like a little professional. Like out of nowhere, I was suddenly just beading like crazy, and it took over. And it's been one of those things that like I have a mind that always needs to be doing something, always needs to be productive, and beading is a way for me to feel productive but also do it in an artistic way. And also like it just checks all the boxes of scratching my artistic itch, scratching my need to be busyness, and then also like while I'm doing it, it helps me recharge and calm and yeah.
There's that meditative factor to it.
Exactly.
Where if you're not in the right space, it doesn't work.
No.
Right? When we're in a world where, especially someone like you, there's so many pulls from so many different directions. We were talking about work-life balance. Who is she? We don't know. Right? Do you find that it's something where it's always waiting for you? Where it's like, I won't call it a security blanket, but it's that piece where you know if you need to slow down, it's there.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely. But it's also, it can be a double-edged sword for me because I'm the same person who will be like, yes, it's calm, but I'll also be like, I need to stay up until 1 a.m. finishing this piece.
Yes.
I just need to get it done. And then I'm like, so I actually like forced myself to take a break during June because I was like, I'm too busy. I need to, no beating allowed because I actually just need to actually fully unwind and not put myself in that situation. So,
Yeah, well, it's all about that balance, right?
Right.
Because like I get the same way, especially when I first started doing beadwork. And I say that it's because when you're on the path that you know you're supposed to be on, there's less resistance. And sometimes there's the resistance at the beginning where it's almost like when you're trying to push like a really heavy box, there's like that friction. And then as soon as it lets go, you can just go. Right? So sometimes it's when we move away from what we thought things were supposed to be or the journey we were supposed to be on, and then we take that other road, it just opens up. And then there's just doors and connections and this beautiful existence where it can be heavy sometimes, you know, where you're working a very culturally conscious career and walking that path, and also something where, you know, advocacy, it can be a lot to carry, right? So is that something where you find your art is, I won't say an escape from that, but something where maybe when you do feel like the world is heavy, how do you, I guess, de-stress? Are you ever not stressed? Are you stressed?
You know, it's, so when the story I told you about the Two-Spirit youth who recently passed, when I heard that news, I literally lit a smudge and I sat at my beading table and I just worked on beading and worked on a piece in their memory, and I cried. And I know some people say like you should only put good intentions into your beading, and for me it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was negative, it was about healing and having that, letting myself put all the emotion into that work and feeling the smudge, and just like that was what I needed to heal in that moment. And so I totally like feel it's there. It gives me something to put energy into in an intentional way. And sometimes it's all positive and sometimes it is those harder things, and I don't feel like it makes it a negative piece. It makes it a real piece, you know what I mean?
Well, and I always say that grief is just love with nowhere left to go. You know, I lost my best friend in February. He was the best person who I'd ever met. And he had cancer. He was my age, and he was gone within 3 months of being diagnosed. And it was just something where, for me, I just started writing. And I wrote like a 20-poem chapbook, where if you want to read it, I'll email it to you. You can give me a review, but no. You know, it was a piece where I didn't know what else to do. But for someone to be so young and for it to feel so unfair, where it's just that feeling of, in some ways there was nothing they could do, but like there's that denial that comes with grief where it's like someone could have done more, or someone could have caught it sooner. Like, why was someone not there for them? When people are young, it's hard, right? And, you know, I think that's where we've talked about creative infrastructure before, and how important it is that we have that there for people where, like I said, when you don't have anywhere for that love to go, the grief can be all consuming. And, you know, the beadwork piece that you made, I feel like, was probably filled with more love than a lot of things that we just make when we're in a happy-go-lucky mood, because grief at the root is really just a love emotion where you don't know what you're going to do with that anymore. You know, when you're moving from that place of being able to create something where you are putting so much energy into it, do you feel better after? Is it something where you actually are able to, you still carry that emotion, it doesn't just get funneled into it, but knowing that you were able to do something in that space where you weren't just alone with your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. Like having something tangible afterwards that's beautiful, and it's holding on to that emotion. Like it's absorbing it, it's taking it, and it was a release. It's better than me holding it in and just getting angry or frustrated, right? That's where I've been able to put it into something, and now I have something tangible that holds that memory. Yeah, we're able to move out of that vibration, because they say the lowest vibration that people can be in is when we're in fear and shame, right? Then nothing's moving, right? And then anger is when we start to get into the movement pieces of, then there's acceptance, love, things like that. And to be able to, like you said, I think it's the tangibility of it, where you're able to look at it, and even if it is tied to that memory, where I think sometimes we don't want to forget. It's not that we're trying to move past an emotion or a memory because we don't want to have it anymore. It's so that we know how to manage it and carry it in a healthy way, in a meaningful way, going forward. Exactly. Because it is something where when you're working with community, especially with youth, it's a piece where they need that structure, and they need people around them where it's solid. They're figuring it out. We, when my partner and I, we go and we're out in the world, we see, especially during the summer, all the teenagers were out doing teenager things, and we're just like, they're really like learning how to human. They're just like, they're figuring it out, and they need people there who are supportive, not just being like, well, what are all these teens doing around here? They need to be able to exist in a community where they can learn how to be, there's so much focus on productive adults, which is important. Productivity is very important. But happy, healthy adults. We're all more productive when we're happy, healthy, and accepted. Yes. Right. And then we walk down good paths when we live in a culture of acceptance and care. Was there a moment where art or the land or community was very healing for you? Every time I go home, and home meaning like where I grew up, I get on the land a lot more there than when I'm here in the city. And so, and it's the land that I grew up on, that I grew up on a trap line and fishing and hunting, and I know every rock, every stick, every tree. And even though it's been some time since I've spent substantial time in that place, every time I'm back and I go for a walk in those woods or to a lake, it's just like, it feels grounding, it feels healing, it feels like I feel that kinship with the land and that connection. And so like I've been, even every time I go back to Ontario and to my hometown, I have been even more intentional to like actually take that time and go for those walks and to make that connection and feel that groundedness. Yeah. Is that something that you miss sometimes when you're up here? Because it's beautiful up here. The nature is beautiful. But I understand the idea of tending to your own garden and the places where you were born. I do miss it. But I always say it's not... My hometown is so tiny and so lacks the... I've made myself so much community here and so much chosen family, and as much as I appreciate my biological family that's there, I don't think I would feel like I would have to repress myself and put myself in a tiny box to go move back. And so I like it in the little spritz that I get it, and I think that it fills my cup enough. But it also, I tell myself, I'm like, I can make that same connection with land here. I just need to get out of my box and do it. Yeah. Well, and that's what it is sometimes, right? It's paving that new path where sometimes it's just hard to try, especially when you're here, you're very busy. And when you get to go home, I'm sure you're still busy. But, you can set that time aside with that intention. Yes. So, I've seen you've been doing a lot of land-based learning stuff, though, with the organization, with Wood Buffalo Pride. So it's something where Claire is incredible. So I'm sure that she would love to take you.
And I can do it if you want. You ever want to go in the woods? I'll teach you things. You probably already know a lot of it, but
I'm like, well, it's funny. It's also like just how different the woods are here compared to like I found it really when I was in Fort Chip and we got a tour of Lake Athabasca and we're on this giant lake and they're like, yeah, it's about 6 feet deep. And I'm like, 6 feet deep? What do you mean? I'm like, where I'm from, lakes this size are 40, 50 feet, 60 feet deep. I'm like, it's that shallow here? Like, that was such a mind-blowing thing for me because like I'm used to these deep lakes with like, and it's, totally different.
Yeah. Well, and it's just to see how people interact with the land here versus there, what's available when the water is different like that. You know, it was such a trip for me when I moved to Kelowna to go to school, like right after the fire, pretty much. I lived in Edmonton for a bit, and then I was in Kelowna, and relearning the plants, because I've always been, herbalism has been my lifelong love, my lifelong learning. My granny taught me, my mom taught me, my dad taught me. So I know most things here. And then going and studying science and botany in BC, and I'm just like, I don't know what any of this is. Like, you know, I'm just like, rose hips. They have rose hips here. I'm good, you know, but even...
Lots of grapes.
Yeah, lots of grapes. We love grapes. Like, so, but it's, you know, when you push yourself out of that comfort zone, for me, it really cemented where I was like, this is something that I'm supposed to be doing, because it wasn't something where I faced resistance of, oh my God, I don't know what this is. I'm not going to learn it, right? It was, I need to know what this is. Yeah. There's something here that I need to learn in this region, on this land. It's trying to tell me something, and it's trying to tell me a story. So even if it's not my ancestors' story there, if I'm able to kind of understand the way that they would have interacted in that region, you know, of the people who were originally there, you know, then I can respect it better. It's a big piece for me. I'm always about what's the respect and reciprocity. What can I do here? Whether it's just in a personal relationship, a business relationship, just existing. You know, I think that we have a responsibility to have a level of, if you're taking at all, you should also give. How do you care for your own healing and rest and time for yourself, where you also give so much to others?
I'm really bad at it. I try, like, taking the time to be and to relax at home. One thing I'm good at doing is, so I am not actually an extrovert. I pretend to be. And so I will, when I've had too much extroverting and I need to decompress, I will just cut everyone out for a few days until I recharge. And like, I'm good at doing that for myself. But beyond that, I'm the one who like neglects calling doctor's appointments. I'm also the person who will be like, I'm in pain, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm allowed to take an Advil. You can take drugs. I'm the worst. I feel you. I'm just like, no, just suffer. And I'm like, wait, this is literally, I
can solve this problem.
Right?
Yeah. I do the same thing.
Terrible at taking care of myself.
Yeah, well, I hope that it's something where you can prioritize yourself a little more, because you are very loved by very many people. You are a local treasure, whether you intended to be or not. And not just as Simma. I just need you to know that you have value as just who you are, not from what you can give. It's you at a soul level are a very, very beautiful person, and your biological family and your chosen family are very lucky to have you.
Thank you.
There need to be more Mitches in the world, truly.
I appreciate that. I really do.
Is there one heart teaching that you would like to share with listeners, whether it's, you know, a Métis teaching or it's just something that you have learned in your life?
I think the biggest thing I would want people to learn that's a heart teaching is to approach everyone with the same kindness and respect that you want to be approached with. And I know that's so basic, but at the same time, it's like I said earlier, like, it's hard to do that when you feel that somebody is approaching you with hate or is approaching you with none of that same energy. But it can break a cycle, and it can it can make a huge difference. It can, when people are so expectant of being faced with resistance and they suddenly are faced with compassion, it can totally change how they approach and how they move through the world too.
Yeah. To finish off, do you want to give any shout outs? We've said a couple different names of people we admire on here, but if you want to do a shout out for anyone, and then we'll share your business at the end.
Okay. Shout outs.
Yeah.
All of my aunties who are out there, making space, and mentioned Ella, Rowan, our whole Pride team that's past and present and future, and just so many amazing community partners who I can't even name them all. There's so many.
Yeah, beautiful. And then where can we find you and your work? Do you have social media? You got a website?
Oh yeah, so work is Wood Buffalo Pride on everything. Then Simma Downe on Facebook and Instagram, and then my beadwork and art is Studio Simma.
Beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. This was the greatest conversation. I feel like we have not had the opportunity to sit and talk like this since we've met. We'll have to do it again, maybe not in front of cameras next time. But if you want to come back for season 2, you certainly can.
Definitely. Sounds great.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Thanks.
All right.